we talked a lot about wanting to talk about Burn After Reading.
Yep.
And obviously there's a lot of options with the Coen Brothers, but there was never really anything that could go with it. So, I was thinking about it for a while, and I was thinking, there's something... Burn After Reading is just such its own thing, there's nothing to really compare it to. And then as my mind started to work a little more, it said, where exactly are you going to find another movie that has been compared to the Coen Brothers and is about idiotic gym employees who get in over their heads and it results in bloodshed?
Yeah.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. If you have been watching these videos the whole time, I've reviewed Pain and Gain about 3 times now.
Yep.
Between the original written review that you read and both of the best of videos last year. But this is kind of like a review like this, because those other 2 weren't exactly, it'll be a little, I will touch on things I have not mentioned before. Hopefully. I don't remember.
And you don't watch his former videos either.
Yeah, those videos were so long ago, I have no idea, but I will do my best. In the event that you're tired of hearing me talk about how much I love Pain and Gain, we'll start with Burn After Reading.
Smart move.
Burn After Reading was written simultaneously with No Country for Old Men. When they would get stuck on No Country for Old Men, they would work on Burn After Reading and go back and forth. That's how it came out right after it. And everything about Burn After Reading is hilarious because of how inept the whole thing is. The plot of Burn After Reading is they're all a bunch of idiots.
Hence the dumb gym rat's cryptic comment.
The plot, if you will, is we start with Osborne Cox, who is John Malkovich, who works for the CIA. He's an analyst. And he's being fired because he has a drinking problem, among many other things. Apparently he's just hard to work with.
Yeah.
So the first thing he does after saying he does not have a drinking problem is go home and start drinking, and before he can tell his wife what happened, they throw a party with the Farrs. Harry Farr is George Clooney, and Harry is having an affair with Katie, Osborne's wife, who is Tilda Swinton. So after Osborne finally tells Katie what's going on, he says, well, I've been thinking of writing a book, or as Malkovich puts it, a memoir.
Yes.
So he's working on this memoir with a tape recorder while Katie is going through the process of divorcing him. And everything involved in this is on a disc. So the woman in charge of this disc that works with, I guess, the lawyer of Tilda Swinton's character, goes to the gym Hardbodies. And employed at Hardbodies is Linda Litsky, who is Frances McDormand, in a Golden Globe nominated performance. A woman who is obsessed with getting a bunch of cosmetic surgeries because she hates the way she looks. And she's lonely and is going on a bunch of online dates. But she really, really needs money for these surgeries. That's her main priority. And she keeps getting caught up in this with her best friend Chad, who is an overzealous trainer played by Brad Pitt with wild blonde hair he had in a commercial once in the early 90s that the Coen Brothers saw and thought he should look like that. And Chad finds this disc that's got Katie's stuff on it. So he's able to track the disc to Osborne Cox. And since Linda is really aching for money for these surgeries, Chad gets the brilliant idea that maybe this disc is worthy of an award. So he calls up Osborne Cox and tries to play secretive with him and says, you know, I thought you might be worried about the security of your shit. I thought he should be aware that his shit is secure.
It should be.
I cannot fucking believe he did not give us a reward. And they have that disc, but Osborne is under the impression that they have his memoir. And all of this spirals totally out of control. And absolutely nothing is happening. The only thing happening in this plot is it's a bunch of idiots being fucking stupid.
Yep.
And ironically, that's brilliant. Because it's so complex, the way everything is connected. But it's just about people being stupid. That's all it is. And only the Coen Brothers could do something like that. And there's all kinds of side plots. Like, let's explore the characters a little more. Clooney is genius here. The character of Harry is this overly... We don't even know why he's so paranoid. But he's under the impression that everybody's watching him. It's because they... Well, first off, he's being followed around by an ominous black car. Who we learn who that is later. And he's also going on these dating sites and meeting and dating random people, even though he's married. But he's charming George Clooney. He can do, you know, anything. There's his wife, there's Katie, there's Linda, and then there's just random people that he meets. And it's the same thing with him. Like, it always just happens, and then he comes out of the shower and does the, maybe I can get a run in. He's always just exercising, that's all he does. He's the guy that has the mattress that's made like an inclined plane that's made for certain things and certain tasks to be. He's got that. He's the kind of guy that has that. And of course, one of the big mysterious plot points is this contraption he's building in his basement that's a present for his wife. And they build it up like it's this really, you know, ominous, mysterious thing, and the reveal is priceless and unexpected, to say the least. But it's just, I just love the way Clooney plays his character, just how, just the way the character is, like when he's at the party, and he and Osborne are kind of doing that back and forth, and he's offering him goat cheese, and he's like, well, you know, I don't think I can take that. I have a lactose reflux kind of thing. Osborne, knowing he's full of shit, just says, like, you either have an acid reflux or you're lactose intolerant. They are not one and the same. Every time Harry enters a room, he, like, stops himself mid-conversation to say, ooh, these are nice floors. You can tell the part was written specifically for Clooney. The thing about this movie is after, O Brother, Where Art Thou and Intolerable Cruelty, the Coen Brothers call this their trilogy of idiots with George Clooney. Then you have Linda, who is... we basically already went through her. She's basically kind of doing her... she's not recycling Marge Gunderson completely, but there are aspects of her in there. There's the great scenes where she's on the phone with the people and she has to, she's trying to get through and she has to say agent over again. She meets the guy at the there's that interesting little thing where she's talking to Chad about the dating site and they're scrolling through all the people and they settle on that one guy, and as she's walking through the park looking to meet him, all the other guys from the dating site are on the benches looking around for other people. And it's just this really awkward date where it's very silent. It's been very silent montage where they meet at the park and then they go out to eat and then they go to a movie and then they go back to her house and bang, and then she goes through his wallet and finds a grocery list and realizes that he's married. And the guy never once has a line. And the whole time he's just completely stone-faced. Should we talk about... We'll talk about Malkovich a little more.
Yes.
Actually, we will talk about Chad. And we will work our way to Osborne Cox. So, as we said, Chad is one of those really, really overexcited trainers. The first time we see him, he's like working on a guy's leg, and then he does the whole, well, my office is calling me, but when I come back, we're going to work on those hips, and then he claps. We see him doing the vigorous dancing on the treadmill, and I've always, pretty much every line that he has is hilarious in one way or another, and the casting of Brad Pitt is brilliant, because nobody saw this performance coming from him. When he found out who Osborne Cox is, he does the dance and snapping, and I got his number. Now, there are two brilliantly hilarious scenes in this movie. The two funniest scenes in the movie. And they both involve an interaction with Chad and Osborne Cox. The first one involving the phone call we talked about with, I thought you might be worried about the security of your shit. The second one is this meeting about the money. Where, she says, she tells Chad that he can't wear his gym clothes, he has to wear a suit. And he does the shot of him with the water bottle, and he's like, well, I'm gonna ride my bike at least. That's like his way of protesting. So he shows up, and he's got the helmet, and he's on his bike, and they're having this big secret meeting. And he comes in, he's got his helmet in his arm, and he's trying to be intimidating by doing the Clint Eastwood squinting. And he does that the whole time. And he calls himself Mr. Black. And he's saying, like, Osborne says this is kind of not what I was expecting. And his thing, he says it multiple times. To be, like, mysterious, he keeps saying, appearances can be deceptive. And he loves saying his full name. Like, he does that the whole time on the phone call. And then here, he's like, he talks about the amount of money they need to exchange. That's what was agreed upon, Osborne Cox.
He's so ominous in his stupidity.
But then the great thing where he says, he breaks this off immediately. You can see the shock in Chad's eye, because this wasn't what he was expecting from this conversation again. And he's like, well, first off, this is blackmail, and that's a felony. And then, if you're gonna go forth with these, threats that you're proposing in this blackmail, that is a federal case. And then, he's like, if you were to act on this, I would cause such a shitstorm on you that your head would be spinning faster than the wheels of your Schwinn bicycle. Prompting Chad to laugh and say, you think that's a Schwinn? It's worth noting at this point that Brad Pitt, I believe, also got a Golden Globe nomination here. That was a fun year. This was the same year Tom Cruise got nominated for a Golden Globe for Tropic Thunder. If only those had been the Oscar nominees, that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
No, there were some good nominees that year.
Oh, yeah.
And he's always trying to pass himself off, as like smarter and more in the know than he is. Like, I love when they go to the Russians and how much of a fuss that causes, because the scene where Osborne's talking about it and he's like, why would they go to the Russians? What the fuck? Everybody in this movie is baffled by the actions of these idiots as we are.
Yep.
We're basically on Osborne's side of all of this. I do love that scene, the scenes with Malkovich by himself as well, like when he's in the house, and like the scene where he's watching Family Feud, like just really zoned out, and then like when like somebody gets it right, like he subtly raises his eyebrows like he's surprised that was an answer. The scene where he's working out on the boat getting ready to basically fuck everything around him up. I was talking about the scene with the Russians, where Chad and Linda go to them, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, because the Russians have no idea why they're bringing this to them, either. And he looks at Chad and he's like, you are not ideological? Of course, Chad is lost, so his response is just, I don't think so. Where he says, he tells Osborn in the car, he says, as soon as you give us the money, dickwad, and then Osborn punches him. For like the next 5 scenes, Chad is nursing that same nosebleed.
Yep.
From when they go, from the little chase they do, from when they go to the Russians, from when they go back to work and they're confronted by Richard Jenkins. And speaking of Richard Jenkins, we can talk about him. His character is really interesting because he brings kind of like, he kind of brings something to the movie that wasn't here before, and like, it's hard to, his character's a little hard to read, but at the same time, he's kind of making it front and center. He clearly has a thing for Linda, and he's like trying to make that apparent to her, but it's always lost on her. Like he, like every time she's like saying, you know, we need to do this and like and she's talking about she's talking about her date with Harry and how great it went, and she's like, you know, Harry's like this and Harry's like this, and it's just like he's trying to say, well, you know, I do those things too, but she, and that eventually is ill-fated for him because it's kind of, he's basically, all he wants to do is run the gym.
Yeah.
Like when he's talking about, like when they first get the disc, he's like saying, you know, I want this out of here as soon as possible. I'm not comfortable with this. When she's like, you know, we should put a note up in the ladies' locker room, and Chad is, put up a note? Highly classified shit file? Anybody lose their secret CIA shit? No, all Richard Jenkins' character wants to do is run the gym properly. Like, when they show up late after they've had the meeting for the Russians, his response is, this is not how we run, this is not, you know, characteristic of Hardbodies. But then there's the scene where she finally tells him what's going on. After Chad has been accidentally killed by Harry in that genius scene, where he's hiding in the closet, basically investigating Osborn's house. And Harry's there after having just banged Katie. And he goes up and he talks about his gun that he's never discharged in 20 years. He's in the shower while Chad is hiding in the closet. But Chad's too afraid to come out. So Harry finally showers and comes back out. I love the questioned look because the mattress is still on the bed. And Chad just kind of notices it and doesn't know what it is. And Harry comes out and opens the closet. And Chad kind of has this, hey, I can explain look on his face, but before that can happen, the gun just happens to be in Harry's hand, and what happens, happens. It's probably the most famous scene in the movie. Because it's so sudden and because they just did away with Brad Pitt just like that. I really, really love that Harry is so paranoid that he very clearly blew Chad's face off. Chad's brains are all over the back of that closet, and he is slumped dead completely. And what Harry does is he runs downstairs and gets a kitchen knife to protect himself.
Yeah.
And goes back upstairs and does the thing where he jumps in and rolls and grabs the gun and talks to the corpse, because he thinks, because Linda said, you know, to tell Chad to, you know, take out all the tags and to not have his ID. So generally Clooney thinks he's killed somebody that's looking for him, that works for the CIA or something. I love the, oh my fuck, what the fuck you doing here, you fucker? And then we learn that he dumped the body in the Chesapeake Bay. But anyway, because this happened to Chad, Linda is under the impression that Chad has disappeared because the Russians are holding him hostage. Because they found out too much. So she goes to Richard Jenkins for help, and he wants to do anything to help her. Richard Jenkins is actually really good here, because he does that without really doing anything, just showing us with his face, you know, his emotions. Like, he wants to go and get drunk when she says that she hates him and stuff like that, and that prompts him to break into the Cox house and try to find what she's looking for, which leads to his ultimate demise when he has a run-in. Once again, his top priority is always the gym. Because Osborn comes downstairs with a gun in his hand, pointing it at him, and he's trying to figure out who he is, and he says, I know you. You're the guy from the gym. And Jenkins' response is, I'm not here representing Hardbodies.
He has his priorities straight.
And that's how, that's also another way you can tell about the way he feels about Linda when, Cox has had enough and he's going on his tirade about how you're with that moronic woman in that league of you're part of a league of morons, and he's trying to be defensive of her, but, this is Cox's point of no return. The hatchet comes into play. Yes, and then we have all of the great scenes with J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons as the least concerned head of the CIA you have ever seen. He's the guy in the movie that's basically us as the audience saying, okay, well, this is happening and this is happening. And keeping track of the characters and what they're doing. And, okay, so what? Has anything happened with this? And then, just that, they just sit back after the movie's ended and everything is played out, and he just says, well, you know, what have we learned from this? Fuck if I know. And then he just says, Jesus fucking Christ, and closes the file and the movie ends. So yes, this movie is totally priceless, and it's just, it's the most complex movie about idiots you will ever see. And only the Coen Brothers could have brought it to us.
And has an amazing end credit song that I would be remiss if I did not mention. The Fugs, whomever they may be, have a song called CIA Man, which is just brilliant in all its awesomeness.
Okay, so, once again, I'll be reviewing Pain and Gain. And yes, by now you're probably wondering, what kind of versus battle is the Coen Brothers versus Michael Bay? Well...
It would have been different before this movie.
Yeah.
And never would have happened before this movie.
Okay, as you know, the plot, one of the great things that Pain and Gain did was, it took a horrific true story. This was a Michael Bay passion project. And what it does is he's basically taken this extremely dark, horrifying true story that happened in Miami in 94 and 95. But the thing about it is this true story is so ridiculous and so unbelievable that they believably made it a comedy.
Yeah.
A very, very black comedy. For some reason, I guess just because it has Michael Bay's name on it, it's often referred to as an action movie. There's one action scene at the end, and then there's the scene where Dwayne Johnson's character tries to rob the bank. That's really the only time we get action scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
And it follows, Mark Wahlberg is Daniel Lugo, and Anthony Mackie is Adrian Doorbal, and they are two guys who... Daniel Lugo was the guy who basically conned old people, and ended up getting arrested for it. And when he got out, he decided that he wanted to do better things with his life, so he came across this, gym, the Sun Gym, which was run by, Rob Corddry's character, John Neese, I think was his name. And it's basically just a getaway for, like, old people. They call it, like, I forget what they called it. It's basically where old people go to die. But he wanted to turn it into, like, a happening place for, like, for younger people and older people, and for people to really, you know, start to care about themselves and all that. So he is persuaded by a sleazy motivational speaker who is Ken Jeong, who normally his shtick is not something I'm a fan of.
Nope.
But he, along with everybody else in the cast, is so perfectly cast in this role. It's perfect. He only has the one scene, but he owns this scene. He really does.
Channeling his inner Frank T.J. Mackey.
Yeah. I had a wife. I had a family. Thank God I left them, and now I have 7 honeys of which I can choose from. I know where you are right now. You're serving a Shane sandwich with a side of shit. The way he jumps through the crowd and moves those guys' heads out of the way and screams in Wahlberg's face. And through this motivation, he gets the idea to make money and get out of this dead-end life by any means necessary. And we're treated to a great, great opening scene where it's Scorsese-like, with the editing and the way it's written and the narration. Because the narration is jumping back and forth depending on who we're on. Like, the first voice we hear is Ed Harris, and then we hear Wahlberg, and whoever we're on is just who is narrating. Whether it be Mackie or... all the way down to the stripper girl. We get it from her perspective, where she talks about how she was influenced by Pretty Woman. And we meet Victor Kershaw, who is Tony Shalhoub, in a deliciously sleazy, slimy performance. Who is basically this guy who got rich while throwing other people under the bus and walking all over them, and being a gigantic douchebag. I've always loved his line. He's talking about eating because he owns a restaurant. And Wahlberg says, do you ever think about a salad? And his response is, do you know who invented salad? Poor people.
Such a great moment in the trailers, too.
Yeah, Tony Shalhoub is just great here. Like,
oh, yeah.
So, he gets the plan to basically... It's very simple. He's going to kidnap Victor Kershaw. They're going to maybe bang him around a little bit and basically get him to sign over everything that he owns to them. But the trouble is they're going to have to kill him, they realize. And one of the great parts of this movie, one of the great big portions of it is the relationship between Victor Kershaw and Paul Doyle, who is Dwayne Johnson's character, who is... He used to be a cocaine addict who was also kind of a cat burglar, but he ended up getting caught and going to prison. So there he found Jesus, basically. And basically fell in with a rapping priest played by Larry Hank. And he eventually gets led to them. And he's really, really naive. And he's really, he's really into the religion now and trying to be a good person. He's sober and he's very strict about that. All his wardrobe consists entirely of shirts that say, like, Team Jesus. And and just how they become, they exchange the names, like... Victor Kershaw knows how naive Paul Doyle is, so he's gonna play right into it. And he's gonna say, like, you can call me Pepe, and I'm gonna give you the name Eldad. And it means, like, like, in God's eyes, and Hebrew or something like that. And he really, really embraces it. Then there's the scene where Kershaw tries to make a getaway, so Doyle just punches him and knocks him out with one punch. And Dwayne Johnson has that amazing delivery of... The Lord has blessed me with many gifts, one of which is knocking someone the fuck out. Pepe, it's Eldad.
It almost sounds like a telephone conversation without the phone.
And then later on when they crash the car and Anthony Mack is the one that buckled his seatbelt in. So he didn't die. Doyle's there and he's like, man, even I know that was stupid. You made a good man suffer. And then, hey Pepe, it's Eldad, you okay? Dwayne Johnson was award-worthy in this movie.
This is like an extension of how great he was in Be Cool, and not enough people saw his performance in Be Cool. His comedic talents are phenomenal.
Yeah, but he's very, very straight in this movie. He's very, It was 1995. He's homophobic, but he doesn't realize it's a bad thing because he's so naive. Because there's... The great scene where they're in the warehouse.
Yes.
His deliveries are so perfect. They're in the warehouse, and the warehouse is a bunch of sex toys. And he's looking at this giant wall of dildos. And he's on the walkie-talkie with Lugo, and he just says, I don't know what's going on right now, but I'm looking at a lot of Homer stuff.
Completely changing the fact that in Be Cool he played a gay man.
Yep. So... but yeah, he does the naive thing, but then there's this middle of the movie where his character relapses.
Yes.
And then he becomes this coked out psychopath. Speaking of, also, even when he's trying to be good, he has those dark qualities. Another delivery I love is when Kershaw starts to turn on him, when he realizes they're gonna kill him. And he's like saying, it's gonna be okay, Pepe, just go with it. And then Kershaw just gets really dark and says... When I die and when I get to heaven, I'm going to tell Jesus what you did. And Paul gets this really dark look on his face and just says, "You're not going to tell Jesus anything." So even when he's like trying to be the good guy, he has those dark places that he goes to, and does it in such a hilarious way.
Yes.
It's such a great performance. And then there's while we're talking on performances, Wahlberg is also really good here.
Oh yeah.
Because he basically takes the strengths of his earlier action movie roles, but adds a really disturbing quality to them. Because the great thing that he did here, everybody, including like Bay and the writers, everybody, the really great thing to respect about Pain and Gain is, despite the fact that your movie stars Mark Wahlberg and Dwayne Johnson, and you put them on the front cover and it says a Michael Bay film, you would think it wasn't going to do the story justice. But never ever once does this movie try to portray them as anything but really, really, really horrible people.
Yeah.
It sticks with that the whole time and makes them as bad as they can possibly get. All the way from him, like, conning the old people to when he, like, when he's torturing Kershaw and he's trying to do the accent, but then by way of his cologne, Kershaw figures out who he is. And immediately he turns, like, really scary and desperate at the same time. And just goes completely insane. And you're basically under the impression that, yeah, when he says he's going to kill Kershaw after this, you believe he's going to kill somebody.
Yeah.
And Wahlberg plays it really, really good.
I haven't seen him this frightening since Fear.
Yeah. And I really, really love that delivery where he gets right up in Kershaw's face and he says, I don't just want to take everything that you have. I want you not to have it. That's a really great delivery. And then we have Anthony Mackie's really good here and really funny. Anthony Mackie was underrated for a long time, but I think now he's finally starting to get the recognition he's been needing. Especially with Captain America coming out. And, yeah. So, there's, the main story with him is the roids. Where we see that scene and he's basically trying to pleasure himself and he can't. So he goes to the doctor that's Peter Stormare and basically a cameo, which is great. Where he meets his wife, his future wife, Rebel Wilson, who's the nurse. And once again, much like Ken Jeong, Rebel Wilson, I'm really not a fan of her shtick or anything that she does, really. But for some reason here, she's really well cast and she's really good in it. And even some of her, even though they seem kind of out of place a little bit, for the most part, she's really good. Especially the courtroom scene and the scene where she's being arrested, she plays really well. Which was really impressive because I didn't expect that out of her. There's, and Rob Corddry's another guy that's kind of hit and miss with me. I thought he was great in Warm Bodies, but other than that, he's basically been, you know, like we just talked about with Sex Tape. He's been kind of brought down to the best friend roles and doesn't really get to do much. But here he has to act as the notary, and he basically says, you know what, fuck it, I need a sponsor for my beauty competition. I will gladly tell you he can sign this over to you. But then, you know, there's those throwaway lines every now and then that maybe aren't as brilliant as the rest of the screenplay, like, when they're trying to get Kershaw's number and he's like, star 69 him, and Corddry's like, you want me to have sex with him? And Ed Harris is really good here, so with, basically playing the cop role who goes undercover, and his narration works really well within the story. He's got that voice that tells the story, like, it really does feel like a true crime movie when you hear Ed Harris's voice narrating it. In that scene, one of my favorite lines in the movie is that last scene when they're being sentenced. And he's narrating, and they're going through everything, and the verdict, and he says, pretty much the only thing they weren't convicted of is the one thing they were most guilty of. Being dumb, stupid fucks. I've always loved that line. Now, and of course the plot gets more and more out of control when Lugo's under the impression that they can make lightning strike twice, and they get involved with the phone sex guy, and that's basically where it gets really, really dark, like very bad things dark. But the thing here is where they cut up the bodies and do all that. But the thing is the movie never strays away from that, because even though we get the scenes that with the comedy and stuff like that, like, yeah, there are moments where Michael Bay kind of, you know, as well made as the movie is, and as much as his vision really fits the movie's tone perfectly, there's still some stuff he can't resist, like the looming shots of cars and tits and women's asses and the dildo jokes and the shit jokes and the scene with, like, the little person and that stuff right out of, you know, Michael Bay's worst movies. But even so, even with all that intact and all the great stuff and all the comedy and all that, it never once loses face of the true story and how bizarre and frightening it was. Like, the brilliant scene where Paul has to burn the hands on the grill, but it gets too smoky in the room for him, so he pushes the grill outside and does this in public. At that moment, as if you've forgotten, because it's just reached that kind of point, it just stops, and words come on the screen that says, "This is still a true story."
Yeah.
Because it's just that outlandish, you still can't quite believe it. And I think that was the perfect moment to do that scene. But no, it's the guys that wrote the new Captain America movie wrote the script, and they are fantastic writers. People may not totally agree, but I thought this movie was just extremely well written and really well put together. And it's this great exercise in excess and, you know, stupidity and psychosis all rolled into one. And I think it's just a really brilliant movie that probably won't get the love it deserves. Number one, because it's got Michael Bay's name on it, and like I said, yeah, he can't ditch some of those Michael Bay-isms. But like I said, for the most part, much like the actors in this movie I wouldn't normally like that I do here, what he does in his normal movies fits this movie really well. And it's also worth noting real quick, I don't know what Paramount was thinking. I don't know what's up with this DVD case.
Yeah.
Because it's really not a good representation of what this movie is. It's really for a selling purposes. Because you see, you know, two big action stars, and you see a random hot girl and then a Michael Bay film across it. You know, that might, you know, get more people to look at it if they didn't realize it was a horrifying true story, but... does it even say true story on the cover there? I can't
No, it just says Mark Wahlberg, Dwayne Johnson, Pain and Gain. That's it.
Michael. Anthony Mackie's still not getting his...
Oh, and the little tiny letters of Michael Bay film.
So yes, if you haven't seen the movie and you come across this case, this is not, like, a very good representation.
No.
Just the one... I like the very first one that came out, where it was them... It was just the two of them with the weights, and the American flag was in the background, and the tagline was, their American dream is bigger than yours.
Yes.
And of course, great use of Gangster's Paradise.
Absolutely.
So yes, of these two, here's the thing. Don't look at it as Michael Bay versus the Coen Brothers.
Please don't.
You have Burn After Reading, which is really good and really brilliant in making a really smart, complex movie about totally stupid people.
Yeah.
Doing really, really stupid things. But it's also really, really minor. Like, Burn After Reading is a very small kind of movie. Whereas Pain and Gain tells this big story and gets this, you know, in a really great fashion. And everything about it just clicks perfectly into place. And like I said, all these elements that don't work in other movies came together and made this really great movie as a whole. And I always thought that was really kind of a fascinating thing the movie did.
Definitely.
So if I had to choose between these two, I really, really love Burn After Reading and could watch it over and over and over again. And I have, and I will continue to. I think Pain and Gain does something really great that really stands out. So... that's the verdict, basically.
Pain and Gain is your winner this week. Next week, just like I alluded to during the AJ's movie reviews, that was 2 days ago, we are going to be talking about true crime next week. So continuing the true crime, it's not really a pattern or anything. It's going to end after next week, but still, I mean, we're going to do another true crime series. This one actually will be two movies that are based on true crime. It's not just for one movie, it's for both. So that's coming next week. And more Halloween Horror Nights news when I get it. Since this is being recorded legitimately on Friday, I will throw out the fact there may or may not have been an announcement tonight, and if there was, you probably have a video by now. So, other than that, wrestling recaps coming for the rest of the week, and AJ's movie reviews next week, versus next week, Ashley's Gaming with Ash segment next week as well, and AJ's zombie reviews coming this Thursday as well. So, that's what we got coming to pop later this week. So, AJ, any parting words?